played in 1997. It was the 30th annual Biel International Chess Festival, and it was a six-player double round robin. Featured some of the very strong grandmasters like Anand, Lautier, Anatoly Karpov, Boris Gelfand, well, it's just a Scandinavian masterclass. Well, sort of an anti-Scandinavian masterclass, but without spoiling too much, let's just check it out. It's just an amazing game. So Anand with the white pieces opens with e4 with d5 by Lautier. It's the Scandinavian defense, of course. E captures, queen captures, and knight to c3. And here you have some options. You can go back with queen d8. You can go queen to d6, which is now very popular. Queen to a5, or even queen to e6 check if you want to, joke around, or if it's a blitz game or not a very important game. But Magnus has been known to play both queen d6 and queen to e6 in some less important games. But here we have queen to a5, which was the norm in those days. We have d4 by Anand, and now knight to f6. We have knight to f3 and c6. So this is all very standard, making an escape route for the queen if needed. We have bishop to c4, Anand continues developing, and now bishop to f5. And this is even by today's standards the absolute mainest of the main line. And here bishop to d2 is the most common move today, but here Anand goes knight to e5, already threatening captures on f7, so black needs to defend this either by bishop g6, which is odd because you kind of shifted the tension in favor of white. White will always be the one who's able to capture, so e6 makes more sense, which Lautier goes for. We have g4 by Anand, forcing the bishop to move back, bishop to g6, and now h4, with the idea of just h5. And here, knight b to d7, stopping h5, as now there's a lot of pressure on the knight here. If you try h5 here, Joel can just capture, and captures with check, and later after white blocks this, you can simply move the bishop to e4, and black is very happy grabbing that pawn. So instead, after knight b d7, we have knight captures on d7 by Anand. You could also capture on g6, but again, black would be very happy here. He gets the semi-open file for his rook, he will castle queenside, and not much for white has happened here. So instead, after this knight b to d7, Anand captures on d7. We have knight captures on d7, and only now h5. We have bishop to e4 attacking the rook, and now f3 is a possibility here, castles is a possibility here, but Anand goes for this very nice rook lift. Rook to h3, and now there is actually a pretty big threat here, and black needs to be very careful. For example, if you just continue playing like nothing is actually happening, for example, you castle, true, white still cannot capture the bishop because the knight is pinned. However, bishop to d2, and all of a sudden, what are you going to do with your bishop? Your bishop is trapped. You no longer have the escape square d5 because white just captures it, because the knight will be defended there, and you will have opened up an attack towards black's queen. So here you'd have to go bishop g2, rook g3, attack the bishop to h1, and now rook to g1, and the bishop is trapped. And if black wants to at least somehow not lose any material, he will have to open up his kingside b5. You're gonna go bishop b3, b4, attack the knight, and only now will you capture the bishop. Captures, and we get this position where white is up a pawn, he has the bishop pair, black's position is completely busted, and the white will have, white should be able to win this game. So it's a really tough position after this rook to h3 for black, and black really needs to decide how he will tackle this. So first, Lautier goes for bishop to g2. He attacks Anand's rook. We have rook to e3, and only now knight to b6. You could now shift the bishop to d5, it's possible, but he wants to get the knight over to d5 to put more pressure on the knight and on the rook on e3. So knight to b6, attacking the bishop, bishop d3, and now knight to d5, attacking both the knight and the rook. Well, now there's just a double attack on the knight, the rook is under attack, so it's not an easy thing for white to figure out what to play here. But feel free to pause the video and try to find what Anand played here. It's just a wonderful move, so, while I give you a couple of seconds. So, for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting that you can actually trap the light square bishop. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, Anand played f3 here. and now it looks crazy because the rook is hanging, you can capture the knight, but none of this actually works for black. Because if knight captures rook, and this was played in one game, and white just won a very nice game, bishop captures, and now you're still gonna lose this bishop, just king f2, and there's no way for this bishop to escape. You're just gonna grab 2 pieces for the rook. So even if a line like bishop to a3 is played, which is the best for black, with the idea that if captures then captures, you're just gonna play bishop c1 and you will claim your bishop. Whatever you play, bishop h3, king f2, even if you try f5 to open up the position, just king g3. Captures, and now the bishop is finally captured. You will have to give it up for a pawn, and now white will just be very happy. He will play bishop g5, bring the rook into the game, and even though his king is somewhat opened, it doesn't really matter because you're up material. So this is what happens after this f3 move if Joel goes for knight captures here. There's also the possibility of capturing the knight on c3, and even this was played twice, but in both instances white just won, because after captures and captures with check, just bishop d2, the rook is nicely protected, queen captures on d4, and now you play king f2. You don't really mind. Bishop will have to capture. You cannot capture with the queen because of just queen captures rook, but then king captures, and you're again very happy. You have 2 rooks, you have the bishop pair, and well, even though black has 3 pieces for 3 pawns for a piece, it will not be enough. But you know, it can be played, definitely can be played. So knight captures on c3 is an option, but in practice, black never really got anything from it. So here after f3, we have bishop to b4 by Joel, and it is as of move 15 that this position has never been reached again. So what can Anand do here? Anand just says, okay, I don't mind the triple attack here, I'm just gonna continue doing my thing. King f2, I attack the bishop, and here Joel found a very interesting line. Bishop captures on c3, b captures, and now not knight captures. If knight captures, queen e1 just wins, because the knight cannot move, bishop d2 is coming, and that's just game. So queen captures on c3, and now rook to b1. The rook is under attack, so you have to move it, and now queen captures on d4. And now there's a double attack on the rook, so if you capture the bishop now, you're gonna win the rook and the bishop. So very, very nicely played by Joel. And here the problem is, you can't really do this. If you go for it, then just captures, and captures. You could go for b7, but black just castles here, and well, you're up the exchange, and black will have a winning game. So here, after queen captures on d4, we have rook captures on b7 by Anand, and here Anand says, I don't mind if you capture here, because you're not castling, your king is staying in the center of the board. Point is that if castles, just bishop captures on h7, and the queen is lost. After you capture this, queen captures on d4, and white wins. So here, instead, after this rook captures on b7, Lautier played rook to d7. Now, after the knight moves, the queen will be defended, and also there's a lot more pressure on white's queen here on the d file. But here, Anand has such a brilliancy that, well, I must urge you to pause the video and try and find it, while I again give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations, not only if you spotted the move, but also if you understood why the move is played. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's h6. And h6 is such a deep move that, well, once you see it, you finally believe it. But you know, playing it actually in an over-the-board game is just remarkable. Point is, what Anand wants to do here, he wants to open up this diagonal for his light square bishop, because the light square bishop has access to this diagonal, but Anand also needs to make sure he has access to this diagonal, which we're gonna show why. So here, what can you play here? Well, you could just ignore it and now finally capture the rook, because now your queen is defended, there's no tricky business here. For example, bishop captures, queen e5, again keeping an eye on the bishop, so if king captures, you can always capture here. But now comes h captures on g7, rook g8, and queen to c1, defending the bishop, and you're going after the light square bishop. This is what this game about. This entire game is about this light square bishop being trapped here, and it's the main reason why all the tactics work in Anand's favor. And here the bishop is trapped, you're gonna have to go after this, but now white even doesn't have to capture first, he can first just trade down into an endgame. Here Anand threatens checkmate, and there's no good way to defend this. You're gonna have to trade here, and after captures, you're just gonna capture the bishop, and you're gonna enjoy this endgame, a winning endgame where you have two bishops, so a bishop pair for black's rook, completely winning for white. So here, after h6, Joel said, alright, I see you're planning some devious stuff here. I'm just gonna capture this pawn, and I'm gonna play knight captures on e3 next, or depending on what you play. But now comes a move that, well, you had to see if you found h6, but just in case you didn't, for the last time, pause the video and find the move, you know, while I give you a couple of seconds. So, for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting, well, definitely one of the greatest moves ever played. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's bishop to g6. That's right. That's what it's all about. Bishop to g6, and white wins. And now there are so many threats, so many possibilities here. So firstly, Anand's queen is now hanging. So if Joel wants, Joel can just pick up Anand's queen. But the problem is, after queen captures queen, now not bishop captures here. This looks very interesting, but then the king just moves, and after the bishop delivers check, the knight can block the bishop's check. So there's an even stronger forced mate in 4, rook captures on e6 check. And now you don't really have a lot of options. If king f8, now the opening of this diagonal makes sense, and this is why Anand had to play h6. Bishop captures on h6 with check, king g8, and now bishop captures on f7 is checkmate. So this is the good stuff. And if rook captures on e7 after this, on e6, Joel just blocks with knight to e7. Doesn't really help, you just capture it here, and it's the exact same checkmate. Captures king to g8 and bishop captures on f7. A very nice double bishop checkmate. So, after this bishop to g6, Joel of course saw, okay, it's not possible to capture the queen, let's just play something. But there is nothing to play. So here Joel tried knight to e7, now, okay, blocking rook captures on e6 because it no longer comes with check. But now Anand finds the absolute simplest way of how to win the game. Now that all of the tactics have worked for him, the game once again turns around to this trapped light square bishop here on g2, and Anand plays the absolute simplest queen captures on d4. Rook captures, and now combining everything, rook to d3, saying you either capture and my bishop gets out of harm's way, or if you move the rook, let's say rook c4, then just rook b8 check and everything falls apart, because you no longer have the option of moving the king, so you have to give up the knight. After captures, you're gonna have to give up the rook, and everything just falls apart. Rook captures on c2, you're gonna block this, and after captures, you're finally gonna capture this bishop on g2, and you are up a whole bishop and a rook. So here, after rook to d3, Joel said, alright, well, if I capture, then just bishop capture, so I will not be capturing this bishop either way, so I'm gonna play rook to d8, but now nothing just works, because rook captures on d8 with king captures, and now everything wins here. Bishop captures wins, rook checks wins, bishop back to d3 wins. And it was in this position that Joel Lautier resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. And once again, we return to the trapped bishop on g2, who is trapped, and there is no way for him to escape. He will have to give up the bishop, and after king captures, Anand will just be up a full piece in a completely winning endgame. So yeah, definitely a great one. So thank you for recommending that I show it. There are games as epic as this one that I still haven't shown, but I've only been doing this for a few years. We're gonna go through them all at some point. So yeah, a great game against Joel Lautier. He was born in Canada, but he's a French grandmaster. He was a 2-time French champion, I think in 2004 and 2006. And all in all, a very strong grandmaster, and achieving a game like this against such strong player, I mean, h6 followed by bishop to g6, an absolute masterpiece. And, again, against the Scandinavian, so no wonder, Scandinavian never got its fair share of glory, but we are still waiting to see the Scandinavian masterpiece. And regarding the standings of the tournament, even though Anand lost one game, that was a bit of a surprise to Milov. He was still able to win the tournament half a point ahead of Anatoly Karpov and clinch first place in this 30th edition of the Biel International Chess Festival. So Anand, Karpov, Gelfand, Lautier, Milov, and Pelletier. So these were the final standings.